Okay, guys, are we ready to start? Hi, everybody. Welcome to SKOLKOVO. It's a great pleasure for us to welcome you. We are doing today's event in English, so if you have trouble understanding English, we have headsets, and we have a great interpreter, Dmitry, helping us spend this evening effectively. So welcome. Tonight, the main speaker is Tomas Casas, our professor, who will talk about Eurasia, the digital revolution that is taking place in Eurasia. Tomas is a great friend, a great expert, so I won't be stealing too much time from him tonight, but my goal is to share with you a little bit about our school, tell you a little bit about the program, why this is such an exciting project for our school, and why this is a great instrument to develop yourself if you're doing business, particularly if you're doing business in Eurasia, okay? So we'll talk about a little bit about the reasoning why this program was created, the content, how the studies take place, what it takes to come into the program, to be selected, to pass all the tests, what are the requirements, and also a little bit about the partnership that we are going through with HKUST, a very important stage in our development, in our business school development, but I believe also a very important partnership project for our colleagues from Hong Kong. So my name is Max, and I know a lot about the school. I work here, but also the story of my appearance in these walls, I think, is maybe a little bit interesting. In 2012, while living in Israel, I decided to look for an executive MBA program for myself. I was considering moving back to Moscow. I'm originally from here. So I got admitted to LBS and was hoping to start my studies at the executive MBA program with LBS at their Dubai campus. And then suddenly I found out that there is a very interesting initiative in Russia, a business school that is saying it's different, saying it's about entrepreneurship. So I went to a presentation much like this one. And here I am. I have graduated from this program, SKOLKOVO Executive MBA program, in 2014. And then a year later, I was invited to join the school's team. I thought it would be something interesting for a year and a half. It's almost 4 years that I'm here, and I'm liking it more and more. I think I'll spend another good time here. So be careful, guys, today, because maybe if you look at me, maybe something can change in your life as well. The program that we are talking about today is aimed at Eurasia. Why did we create this program? I will show you the slide, and then we will take a look at a very nice video that we will release tomorrow on our website, a video that we specially created for this program, but today you will be the first audience that will see this video. There's very interesting, a lot of interesting stuff is happening, obviously, in the world. Asia is the most active economic region in the world. A lot of world-renowned economists talk about Asia as the center for macroeconomic growth in the world. And obviously, China, if we talk about Eurasia, is launching or has launched a very ambitious initiative, which is called the Belt and Road Initiative. It was announced by Chinese Prime Minister in 2013 while he was traveling. Who knows where, in which country, he came out and said, this is what China will do for the next 17 years until 2030. Who knows where it was? I will give you a hint. It was in one of the Eurasian countries. So take a guess, somebody. Kazakhstan. So is it a guess or is it a statement? The guess is right, so we can make it a statement. Yeah, he was in Kazakhstan, and he basically pronounced this initiative. I'm sure you know about it. If you don't, it's a good time to learn about it, but it's basically huge amount of investment that China is going to make over the next decade, even more, building infrastructure in other countries, primarily Eurasian countries, that will help these countries trade with whom? With the United States. Maybe a little bit, but mostly, if China is coming to Pakistan and building a huge port, whom China wants Pakistan to trade more with? Obvious answer. So this project is a very interesting thing. Russia, Kazakhstan, and many other countries in our region are part in this project. So we came up with the idea that it's a good material to be studied, to be applied. Around this material, we can assemble a program, and the feedback from the academic community in business schools worldwide has been magnificent. People from England, from US, deans, professors from many schools worldwide that we talked to said, this is a great idea, guys. We are not sure you can do it, but it's a great idea. So BRI is one of the focuses of this project, of this program, one of the main focuses. It's not a theoretical focus, it's an applied focus, but it's very good to understand big pictures through smaller pictures. So this is the role that BRI is playing in this program. If Eurasia is developing, if such huge infrastructural and economic projects are happening, demand for managerial talent is going to go up. Historically, people looking for business education were always starting with US schools and the European schools, but things are changing. A lot of people today are looking for Chinese business schools. Not many yet are looking for Russian business schools. We're here to change that a little bit. But partnering with HKUST gives us huge leverage in this aspect. And of course, it's a great market niche. It's a great market niche. Eurasia as a whole, undoubtedly. Russia and some other countries in Ukraine, you could argue, but there's a huge amount of people that understand that Russia isn't going anywhere. It's a huge market, and maybe it's a good time to come into it. So this was our thinking when we were launching this program. This was the motives. Let's take a look at the video, and maybe you can get...
How do we see the world?
The hint more.
Like this, sometimes like this. The nations of Eurasia look into the future, and going from being a home for most of the world's greatest empires to the global locomotive of the innovation and growth. Today, the countries of Eurasia are again establishing innovative trade, investment, and technology ties with each other. New economic hubs thus emerge. In the coming decades, Asia will become the epicenter of dynamics in many spheres. In addition, we are witnessing the formation of a common space for trade, investment, and technology. The new Eurasia. Since 2013, China has been actively investing in the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, a new model for international cooperation and development. BRI unites more than 60 countries, plans $1 trillion worth of investments, and includes 7 far-reaching focus areas. To support the growth of the region, the PRC is building new infrastructure facilities that affect the economy of entire regions. Islamic economy is bringing new vast opportunities for finance in Eurasia. Through developed system of links and alliances, Eurasia becomes a cohesive and increasingly unified economic center, in which each region maintains its unique characteristics. To seize all the emergent opportunities for business in the new Eurasia, it is necessary to understand the cultural aspects and specifics of local markets, as well as to be able to build strong relationships with the government of different countries. The business schools of HKUST and SKOLKOVO are launching a new executive MBA program designed to meet the opportunities and disruptions of the new Eurasia by creating a new type of leader. The world needs those who have to be able to read complex contexts between the lines and build our capabilities of acting in the changing conditions. EMBA for Eurasia, your road to the top.
Пожалуйста, я вас очень прошу, похлопайте вон тому человеку.
Can you please give a round of applause to Kirill over there? Thank you. That's Kirill Zakharov. He's our marketing guy. He produced this video.
Hey guys, I switched to Russian. So thank you, Kirill, for this video. It looks like everything's clear. Eurasia, BRI, China, but things are not that clear. Eurasia is a very complex region. In order to do business here, you have to be very inquisitive, learn about cultures, learn about various interests, and this is one of the goals of this program. So let's go through some of the materials, what we're planning to do. My clicker isn't really working. Here it is. It is working now. So the program is being developed and will be operated by 2 business schools. 50% will be representing SKOLKOVO, 50% will be representing HKUST, and of course, a big part of the professors and instructors and speakers that we will meet with, we're going to meet with at business schools that we will visit. As you will find out shortly, we will not study only at HKUST and SKOLKOVO, but at many other places. Our goal is for business people, entrepreneurs, managers, to come out of this program really, really deeply understanding Eurasia. Of course, since this is an executive MBA program, we are taking very successful, mature people. A lot of the knowledge is there already, but this is how the adult education works. We take everything that you know, we put it in places, we add stuff in order for you to come out richer than you have come in. You see here very interesting stuff that we are working at as an exclusive content for the program. All MBA programs in the world are based on the famous case method. So we are writing, the 2 schools, academic people from 2 schools, we are creating cases that you can see here, cases that have never been written before. Actually, in the case banks that business schools use worldwide, there are not so many cases about Eurasia, more and more coming around China, but things like Islamic finance, for example, which is a very, very interesting and not so known instrument for financing in our region. Stuff like this is going to come into the program, so you're not getting only famous international cases that all business schools teach. You also get cases that we write, teaching cases that we create for this specific program. We've spoken about the Belt and Road Initiative. I think I shouldn't be talking about it because Tomas is an expert, I'm not. But as a businessman, I understand that if I don't know about this stuff, if I have no idea what's going on in my region, it's not good. I need to learn about it. So I'm calling on you to get acquainted with this initiative if you haven't already. It's really something very interesting. The program is basically aimed at people who would like to work at this stuff, to understand the cultures and the nations of Eurasia better, to network more, and you will see all the mechanisms that we will give you for networking in various countries when we study. Of course, the innovation and the 4th Industrial Revolution, which Tomas will talk about today in detail, and we'll talk a lot about leadership. All these 4 things can give you a hint what the program will be focused on. So, giving you some details, simple details. It's a part-time modular program. You don't have to quit school, quit the jobs, or say bye-bye to your family, maybe a little bit. So you can combine your business with studying. The program is run in English. You have to be at least upper intermediate, better advanced. We study from November to March. We start in 3 months in November, a little less than 3 months. 16 months, the tuition fee you can see here. And we project that the first class will be around 40 people from several or maybe even many European, Eurasian countries. This is how we think the class will look like. We have about maybe 17 people in class already, people who have passed admissions and signing contracts and securing a spot in class. But this is what we project will happen. So it's going to be a truly international class, and this has never been done before in this country. No educational institution in this country has ever invited mature business people from other countries to come here, not only here in this case, and learn. So we're very enthusiastic that we can crack this challenge and be the first ones to launch a truly international executive MBA, a huge part of it, of which is happening here in Russia. So these are the 3 pillars that we are going to address. Eurasia, I've spoken about it. Innovation, you'll see where and how we study innovation. And of course, leadership. Leadership is one of the most popular words in business school curricula today. Leadership is not an amateur science. It's a developed academic discipline with several different schools, European, American, Eastern. So this is going to be a huge focus of the program as well. Now, where do we go? Where do we study? From my initial speech, you could easily guess we're going to study at this campus, at HQST, but not only. So we go to Israel. Why do we go to Israel? What's interesting in Israel? What's so interesting in Israel? Who can tell me? Any Israelis other than me? You? So what's interesting in Israel? Why should we go there? High tech. But what's interesting about Israeli high tech? Because Sweden got high tech, Switzerland has high tech, China has high tech, even Russia has high tech. If you talk about military, for example. Why Israel? Why Israeli high tech? Startup culture. Very interesting geopolitical, I will say interesting. Some people won't agree with me that it's interesting. Very unusual geopolitical situation, okay? So a big focus on innovation that we will study, and of course venture. Israel is not a huge venture capital market, but outside US, it's pretty big, okay? So then we go to Switzerland. We talk about Europe as part of Belt and Road Initiative. We talk about innovation in Switzerland. What's so innovative in Switzerland? Wait a minute, Max. Switzerland is what for us Russians? Cheese? Watch? Banks? Maybe chocolate? Also skiing? Production? A lot of production technologies. Hi, Thomas. I'm not stealing your content. I'm not teaching these folks about Eurasia. I'm just warming up them for you, okay? But Switzerland, guys, is #1 for how many years? For 11 years, right? For many, many years, Switzerland has been #1 in Global Innovation Index. And this index is developed and managed by INSEAD, a French business school. And they admit that Switzerland is the most innovative nation. So when we go to Switzerland, we of course study Eurasia, we of course look at Silk Road terminus at Europe, but also we'll look at a very innovative country. Russia, for obvious reasons, a big chunk of land between Europe, Africa, and Asia. A lot of interesting things, to my mind, are happening here. And doing businesses in Eurasia without understanding Russia, well, you know my opinion. Of course, we'll go to Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan is a very important place for Belt and Road Initiative, a booming economy. Uzbekistan nearby, very interesting things happening. Of course, China. And then we finish the program in Armenia. So looking at the Caucasus, looking at a very interesting city of Dilijan, small clusters happening in very unusual places like Armenia, understanding the dynamics of this region. Iran is nearby. It's a Turkey, very interesting part of our program. So then, of course, if we study innovation, we need to go to the Silicon Valley, look at innovation both from the Israeli perspective, the Chinese, the Swiss, what can Russia do with innovations, but of course go to the Mecca of venture investment and startups, to the Silicon Valley. All places that we go to, guys, other than Moscow and Hong Kong, where do you think we go? Where do we go in the Silicon Valley? Where do we go in Israel? Who is hosting us there? How do we study there? You have a version? Have a guess? Of course, we meet with companies, we have experts, we have projects that we do. It's not just lectures. But if we talk about lectures and meeting professors, where do we go? We bring all of the professors from Hong Kong and Russia to these places, or maybe there is another way? Well, the answer is clear. We go to top business schools that we partnered in these countries. I will show you this list a little later, but for this moment, please let me talk a little bit about leadership. As I said, leadership is a huge part of the curricula. There are several schools, several ways of teaching leadership in business schools worldwide. Our business school tends to teach leadership in the European model. This is how it's called sometimes, developed by INSEAD and IMD. It's called the psychodynamic approach to leadership. But our colleagues from Hong Kong think of leadership in more American terms, talk about the experience-based model. So the leadership course is going to be very interesting because you will get both schools that sometimes argue with each other how to teach leadership. But in this program, our streamlined course in leadership is going to be actually representing both of these schools. You can learn more about this if you're interested. Come up to me, come up to my friends. We can tell you what to read about those schools, how the psychodynamic approach works, what is the experience-based approach. But just for the sake of this presentation, trust me that the leadership course is a huge part of this program, and the approach that we're taking in this program is very, very interesting. So this is how we're developing you throughout the program: Eurasia, innovation, leadership. This is how we're planning to enrich you when you join the school. So this is where we go. This is how the program looks. It's kind of crazy, huh? We go to HKUST twice for pretty long periods of time, more than a week. We study at Kohler School of Management in Tel Aviv University. We study at Haas Business School in California, at Berkeley University. We go to University of St. Gallen in Switzerland. This is the school that Tomas Casas works for. We go to a very interesting new educational institution called the Nazarbayev University in Kazakhstan. The business school of this university operates together with Duke. Right, Thomas? And then we, of course, spend a considerable amount of time here at our campus and also visit a very interesting place in Dilijan. As I said, it's not a business school, It's a huge international high school, but the cluster around that school is very interesting. And our leadership course is going to finish, and the program is going to finish in Armenia. So look at this list. You know, it's a truly international program. Very interesting opportunity to network, get different perspectives, different views on Eurasia, on Belt and Road initiative. It's going to be very enriching, I think. Top professors from all over the world, representing either HKUST, HKUST, SKOLKOVO, or our partner schools in these countries that I have mentioned. You will see Tomas today. Tomas is going to be really involved into this program. He's the academic director of this program. A lot of the stuff that I'm talking about, Tomas taught me. He taught me to say these words, to understand some of them, okay? So if you're inquisitive enough today, you can maybe ask Tomas some questions. And also one important thing, adults don't learn from theory only. They learn from theory combined with practice. So there will be a huge focus on the practical component. You will do real projects through this educational experience. We call it the capstone project. We can tell you more about it. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be your project, not ours. But we will help you do your project and do some research and do some real business. And all of the program's resources will be aimed at helping you to do it. So, learning outcomes is basically a little bit repeating what I've said. We want you to lead better, think smarter, be more innovative, understand Eurasia, broaden your horizons, even when we talk about humanitarian subjects for business people. And of course, understand how to use technologies and learn what is this fourth industrial revolution and how you can benefit from it, or how you can follow it in order to survive. Because maybe if you don't follow it and don't adjust, maybe you won't survive. Maybe your business is going to become old and be thrown away. As I said, 50-50. The professors are going to come from two schools. You can read about these fantastic people at our website. I've studied from this gentleman, Dr. Keith Goodall, in my executive MBA program. I also studied with Moti Crystal, that you can see on the slide, our professor from Israel. Both of them are also participating in this project. But for the most part, Thomas, the professors that are in this program are new. Some come from the programs that are at SKOLKOVO, but for the most part, these are brand new professors, brand new content that we are developing together. We are starting in November, as I said. We have exact dates of all modules that you will study. We know these dates already, so you can take a look at the calendar and plan and think how doable it is for your schedules. There is a competition to get in. It's not fierce, I won't lie to you. It's a very expensive, very difficult project, and if you're applying to this program, you are already worth something, but we don't accept everybody. These are the requirements that you must have, and we help you with the admission process, with tests, writing an essay, submitting documents, having interviews. You have 2 interviews, one from SKOLKOVO, one from HKUST. So we're taking a very good effort to talk to you before you join the program, to make sure you're motivated and to also check your profile. So the partnership between our business school is a very important part for our strategy. HKUST is a very interesting story, a 27-year-old university which is among top Asian universities today. HKUST's business school is very famous in the world because their executive MBA program with Kellogg has been ranked #1 in the world by Financial Times for many years. So we are really fired up about this partnership. This partnership is not limited to this program. We do a lot of stuff together, but this program is probably one of the brightest parts of this partnership. Please learn more about HKUST. Their story is fantastic. The place that they are situated, the location is also fantastic. I think our campus is prettier, Thomas, don't you think? but the location that they have, these guys have the location with the sea and the hills is incredible. And this is also a very special place for all of us, and a very special place that's making some difference in this country. So thank you guys. Thomas, I'm sorry for stealing maybe 5 minutes of your time. Come guys, try yourselves. Come study. Even if it's not this program, even if it's not this school, invest in developing yourself. Even if you're rich, if you have 1,000 employees, if you've worked in many, many countries, never stop to develop yourself, to learn, and maybe we can be also helpful to you on this journey. Thank you very much. Enjoy the masterclass with Thomas. Thanks.
You're introducing me. Oh, I've been introduced already.
I introduced you a little bit,
okay.
And I wish you a great time.
Thanks,
Thanks,
you.
Thomas.
I hope you really got now the bug you have after hearing to Max, this thirst for knowledge, that you want to understand more about Eurasia, that you want to develop your own leadership skills. And what we're going to do today is give you a little bit of a pre-taste of what the program is all about. Now, digital integration of Eurasia, is this real, or is this a vision that will happen, right? And you have all seen this map before. What is this map? It's the famous Belt and Road Initiative that the Chinese government announced and is ready to implement. And this vision will change the world. Now, not everybody thinks that the Chinese government will succeed. However, the plans are constantly evolving, are constantly improving, and are providing opportunity to countries all over Eurasia. Now, if you look at the comparison between the Marshall Plan, and this is very important, the reason I'm putting here the Marshall Plan and I'm comparing it to the Belt and Road Initiative is because both have been compared very often. The Chinese government is putting money, you know, where the words are. So it's backing up its vision with concrete projects. Now, have you heard of any Belt and Road Initiative projects in the past? I'm sure you have, right? Now, can you give me some examples of Belt and Road Initiative projects? Any project you have heard? Some concrete type of project? Sorry? Korgos, exactly. Korgos, and by the way, we're writing a case study on Korgos because Korgos is this, or Khorgos, right? This dry port on the border of Kazakhstan and China. And this dry port itself will completely change the flow of traffic between China and Western Europe. Rather than going by ship, right, which takes a lot of time, can take 40 days, you can take the rail connection, right, and arrive in Europe in under 10 days, right? Of course, you can go by plane in within 1 day, but this is very expensive. So the Belt and Road Initiative is a collection of projects from Khorgos in Kazakhstan to ports in Pakistan. Eastern Europe is very much involved in it. It's high-speed trains. And if you look at the amount, right, if you add all the money that China tries to spend, I mean, the Marshall Plan, right, everybody knows about it, $13 billion, which today is the equivalent of $170 billion, right? So that's equivalent. That was the Marshall Plan, and the Marshall Plan helped Western Europe after World War II get back on its feet and economically start a development process. It ignited a development process. The question is, can the Belt and Road Initiative ignite a development process with all the associated opportunity that this means in Eurasia, right? And if you look at the amount of money, right, that is going to be spent, I mean, we're talking about trillions, right? Already 4 years into it, there's 2 to 3 times the amount of the Marshall Plan spent. So the Chinese are serious about this. Why is China spending all this money, right? This is something we will discuss in a second. Now, I don't know what happened here. Okay, we're back in business. And if you see the priorities, the industries that are going to be encouraged in the Belt and Road Initiative, you have basically everything from agriculture and life sciences to oil and gas, technology, media, telecom, utilities. So no matter what industry you are from, the Belt and Road Initiative could give you and your company an opportunity to further develop, right? If we believe that the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, is serious. Now, if you look here at some areas, right? Steel, for instance, you will see the steel consumption, right, of BRI countries that is still less than China, Germany, Japan, the US. So there is potential in the BRI countries for economic growth. This is what this slide is trying to tell us. What this slide is trying to tell us is that if the Belt and Road is only about steel, it's only about construction, it probably will not work. There needs to be something else. What did America do after World War II besides the Marshall Plan? The Marshall Plan was giving money, right? Lots of it, and it helped the economies of, war-destroyed Germany, Italy, France, etc., England, to develop again. But what else did the Americans do after World War II that is responsible for the success and the reconstruction of Europe? Knowledge, absolutely. So delivery of knowledge, extremely important. What else? A political system. Somebody said the World Bank. So the International Monetary Fund, new institutions. So if the Belt and Road Initiative is only about projects, it will not change the world as we know it. It will be a collection of nice projects. Those who invest or participate in the projects will make money, right, and will benefit from those projects, but it will not be transformative. It will not change the world order. You need to have new institutions, just like the Americans did after World War II. That's the challenge for the Chinese today, right? And this is, by the way, in this room over here. If you see, I mean, those gentlemen over here were sitting, it was about a year ago, and you probably know two of the gentlemen very well, or more than two of the gentlemen very well, right? The person sitting over here, you know them, and then you see this person here. Do you know who this person is? The Chinese individual? Jack Ma, right? What happened a year ago here in this room in SKOLKOVO? What did Jack Ma tell your prime minister? What do you think he told them? Well, he told everybody in this room, right? He says, I'm going to contribute to this, if you will, this digital Silk Road, right? I'm going to make sure, when I came to Russia for the first time, if somebody wanted to order something from Alibaba, it took over 2 weeks. I want to reduce this time to 2 days. And I want to build the logistics, IT, data infrastructure to allow this to happen, right? So the Belt and Road is not only about steel, it's also about data, right? Or at least that's a Chinese vision for it. So, since we're talking about China now, let's take a step back, because the future of the 21st century hinges on this question over here. You're all familiar with Made in China? Do you think the Chinese are happy with Made in China? Half of the products in the world are already produced, physically produced in China. Is this enough for the Chinese? Have they achieved their objectives? Of course not, right? The Chinese want to move from Made in China to invented in China. right? This is a big question. Can they do it or not, right? This is the question of the century. Because if they do it, China will go from a GDP per capita of about 10,000 US dollars per person to maybe 3 times, 4 times, right? If they become maybe 2/3 as rich per capita as the US, their economy is 3 times as large as the economy of the US, right? So that's what we're trying to say here. You have seen this picture over here. China is at 10,000 today. If China innovates and invents, right, and this is something we have been saying for many, many years, and China achieves advanced economy status, the Chinese economy will be how many times larger than the US economy? Right? We said it earlier, 3 times. Right? And this will be such a gravitational pull for Eurasia. This will allow Eurasia to boom. Everybody will benefit from that. Right? So we have to position ourselves. How can we benefit? How can our companies benefit from that? And it's not going to be easy. There will be problems. There will be economic recessions. There will be trade wars. There will be all sorts of issues. And yet, if we believe that China can make it to this level, Russia, Central Asia, Europe even, is extremely well positioned to benefit from that, right? We want China to succeed. The richer China is, the richer everybody else is going to be. It's not a zero-sum game. It's a win-win game, right? We want China to succeed. And of course, when China succeeds, and this is an interesting book, When China Rules the World, it will be different than the present institutions that were created after World War II by the Americans, are supported now by America and Europe. But, you know, geopolitically, economically, culturally, in terms of institutions, there will be a lot of movement, a lot of dynamics, and this is what we want to understand, right, in this course. Of course, there's risks. I don't need to tell you that, and we will see how they play out. But if you look at top Chinese, right, China is paying more attention to quality than to quantity. And this is extremely, extremely interesting. Let me ask you, how many of you believe that China, let's have a show of hands, can make it from made in China to invented in China? How many of you say China can make it? Okay, we have some hands. How many of you say, no way, China cannot make it? Who is not that confident? All right, some of you have been to China, so you obviously, right? So it's not by any means a foregone conclusion. It could go in either way, right? We don't know which way it's going to go, but I can tell you, for us, for our wealth, for our development, for our prosperity, we want China to succeed. We don't want China to get stuck. And in the past, China got stuck because in the past, China was the richest, most prosperous, most technologically advanced society on the planet, and yet they didn't make it, for instance, into the Industrial Revolution, right? And this is the biggest enigma of history. You know, China came within a hairbreadth of industrializing in the 14th century. So the greatest technological or the greatest enigma in economics is how China did not capitalize on its wealth, its market, its economic weight in order to basically conquer the world like the West did later, right? And the West, including Russia, right? It's Russia who went to China. It's not the Chinese who came to Moscow, right? I mean, that's one of the reasons why Russia is so big, or one of the reasons why we speak English or Spanish in the New World and not Chinese, right? The Chinese had the better ships, the Chinese had more money, the Chinese had more technology. I mean, you see some of the technological advantages of the Chinese, from compass, from steel making, I mean, anything, watches. I mean, the Chinese were more advanced. Today, China is again at a point where you have some companies that in many ways are more advanced than Western companies, right? Mark Zuckerberg is looking at Tencent as he plans the future of Facebook, right? I don't know if you're familiar with WeChat. How many of you are using WeChat or have WeChat? Right? You're familiar with WeChat, right? It's incredible. You can do everything with WeChat. In China, you don't need money. You don't need cash. All you need is a mobile phone. It's your ID card. I mean, it's your banker. It's you know, your e-commerce, everything. You can do everything, right? You can do education. You can get degrees. You can, right? So they're very advanced. I mean, this is an interesting, by the way, this is an interesting New York Times small video. You can have it, or you can look at it after this lecture and see how in many areas, in many technology areas, China is already at the cutting edge. Not in all, but in many. Now, to see how things work in China, we have this case study about this gentleman over here, who, as I told you 1 year ago, was sitting over here, and Jack Ma, right? So we have him over here. And basically, he's showing us, well, he decides to go into a new area. I mean, what do you think Jack Ma's big dream is? If you put yourself into his shoes, what is his vision for the future, for him and his company? He wants to be the greatest in the world. In what area? He wants to be the greatest, of course, e-commerce platform in the world. What else? You know, he wants to issue credit cards for Russians, give maybe small loans for small and medium enterprises. He may want to, you know, I mean, finance projects here, right? He's in e-commerce. Of course, he wants to be one of the top e-commerce platforms in the world. But maybe he's going to be the next Goldman Sachs or Citibank, right? And look what he did. He started in 2013 with a product called Eurasia. Eurasia is basically, you know PayPal, right? You're all familiar with PayPal. You leave money on Eurasia to buy on you know, the money you have left over. That's what it means. Yuebao in Chinese means leftover treasure. So you have some money left over that you don't use for e-commerce. You know what? In PayPal, you don't get any interest. You get zero interest. In Yuebao, in Alibaba's product over here, financial product, you get interest rates that are higher than the interest rates that are being offered by the Chinese banks. Now, what do you think happened in China's financial system after Yuebao was introduced? What do you think happened if all of a sudden, you know, you get all those nice interest rates? Close to running on the banks, absolutely, right? And of course, Jack Ma is not happy because the big banks are telling, you know, the government, listen, guys, you know, Jack Ma doesn't have a banking license. He's not a bank. But there is a run on the banks, the equivalent of $100 billion. Imagine that, $100 billion in 9 months. Move from the banking system, traditional banking system, into this new financial products. The big banks are telling the government, Jack Ma should not do it. Alibaba should not do it. And then it's up to those guys over here, who you all know them, right? To decide whether they give Jack Ma a banking license or not, right? In the US, in the UK, in Europe, in Russia, you could not do it, right? You could not manage 100 billion without a banking license. China is interesting, right? I mean, China is in many ways more flexible, but do you think that Jack Ma got a banking license or not? What was their decision? Did they give it to him? Or they said, no, give the money back, you cannot do that. He didn't need one, but eventually he had to apply for one, right? And then he got it, right? Would you say that he got it? Yes, I mean, here, look at the Financial Times, right? And Alibaba wins approval for, you know, for a bank license, right? So very interesting situation. It also tells us a lot that things in China work a little bit different than things in the West, right? There's maybe more room for experimentation, more flexibility. And this is all very interesting. This is all things we want to learn into more depth. And as a result of that, well, we don't have to read that. I'll just show you the graph. But if you look at the, the Chinese has a late mover advantage, right? And you look at the number of people, doing payments in fintech, right? You will see that compared to the United States, right, America is way more advanced, as you can see from this. So as a result of this institutional flexibility, if you will, or the ability of China to experiment also institutionally, you have much greater adoption rates. So there's something happening in China which we want to better understand. Now, some of it goes sometimes a little bit too far. In China, you can insure everything on fintech platforms. For instance, if you work late at night, you can insure yourself against working late at night, right? Or if you have an unwanted pregnancy, you can insure yourself against an unwanted pregnancy, right? Any event can theoretically be insured, and in China, there's products offering those services. Now, the last example I gave you, the Chinese government doesn't like it, and obviously this is not possible anymore, but it was possible for a while. So China is working in a different way, right? And as a result, there's a lot of dynamism. This is another institution. This is an over-the-counter market where you have now, it's the third board, right? The famous Shinsamban, or the third board. It's an over-the-counter stock market, and you have about almost 10,000 newly listed companies over there. Now, what do you think about, the listing requirements are pretty low, fairly low. Those of you who are in finance, what's your take on the quality of those companies? How are 10,000, right? In the last, most of them were listed, in the last 3-4 years. Do you think the quality of those companies is high? If everybody can list and the requirements are not so, right? Again, it's not for the open, it's to the public, right? You have to be a qualified investor, have about $1 million, right? And then you invest on it, and then you are able to list. So the public is protected because it's over the counter, right? It's not open for the general public. But the quality of those companies, right, with those low listing requirements, is probably not very high. It's like a casino, right? It's very messy. Some great companies, some terrible companies that are going to go bankrupt, and they're going to lose all the money for the investors. Is this a good thing, or is this a bad thing? What do you think? It's different. Probably not, right? So small, low risk, low return, high risk, high return. That's right. So that's exactly what the Chinese government is asking the investors, right? Are you ready to take the risk? Are you ready to go for high risk, high return companies? Is this good if in a stock market 10% of the companies every year have to be kicked out of the stock market because they are bad, right? And in other words, high risk, high return means, high risk means that many will go bankrupt. But it also means that those who don't go bankrupt create incredible wealth for society because, as you said, they're high return. So the Chinese government, despite being communist, despite the Chinese traditional Confucian take, everything has to be stable, have areas in the economy that allow for a lot of risk-taking. But as you pointed out, the upside of risk-taking are high returns. So the Chinese economy is very dynamic because it allows for those high-risk, high-return type of projects, right, as we just heard now. And this is something that's very difficult to do in the West, right? So there's some things happening in China that are interesting. There's other things, like the famous Shanzai system. Many people say, oh, China is about copycats, right? Is this true? Is it true that everything in China is like this? That the Chinese are just copying, right? Like Obama, obviously, President Obama wasn't using this, Obama, the BlackBerry storm or whatever, right? This is a copy, from what used to be the BlackBerry. Are the Chinese still a copy-paste nation? Or are the Chinese already beyond this, right? And this is an important question to ask. And maybe to answer this question, I'm going to show you this company over here. Are you familiar with Xiaomi? I think you've all heard of Xiaomi. The question is Xiaomi the only company that produces smartphones in China? What other names do you know? Huawei. Huawei is probably the number one. Who else? Can you tell me more names? ZTE is another one, right? That is famous. Sorry? Telephones, smartphones, right? There's another one called Oppo. I don't know if you know OPPO. HTC, which is Taiwanese, but also part of the greater China world, right? Using the Chinese ecosystem, right? So basically, what are we saying here? We're saying, how many companies, by the way, how many mobile companies do you have in the West in the producing smartphones? How many? Sorry? Yes, how many actual companies specialize in producing smartphones? There is one, right, that everybody knows. Apple, right? There is Apple. But remember, there used to be Motorola and Siemens and Alcatel, right? What happened, Ericsson? Sorry? Yotaphone, okay, right? Google is still, right? You could say that they're producing mobile phones. But basically, what you have in the West is an economic system that's radically different from China. The source of competitive advantage in China is the ecosystem. Because if you look 4 or 5 years ago, the leading Chinese companies in mobile telephony were not the ones that are leading today, right? There's a great dynamic of competition. The top company changes every year. They're innovating, right? I showed you the fake telephone, the fake BlackBerry, but the BlackBerry is part of an ecosystem that has now developed, and it's able to produce great quality smartphones. And those great quality smartphones are the top of the pyramid of a very large ecosystem. If you look at Apple telephone, smartphone, the iPhone, everything is designed inside by the company. In ecosystems, anybody of you who wants to go and comes up with a good smartphone company could do the same thing that Legion did, tap into the Chinese ecosystem and basically develop a new product. You could become Chinese, right? And benefit from the ecosystems. The future of competitive advantage doesn't reside at the individual company. It resides in where in the ecosystem you are, in what ecosystem you're participating. Because if I show you the principles of the Chinese ecosystems over here, right? This comes from America, and it says, look at those 4 principles. Build nothing from scratch. What does it mean, build nothing from scratch? It means that you collaborate, and maybe you take things from others, right? Yeah, there's probably a more cavalier approach to intellectual property rights, right? Then you innovate at small scales. It's incremental innovation. Apple, I think we would all agree, they're a radical innovator in many, many areas. Maybe not technology, but definitely the business model, definitely the branding, the in-store experience. They're a radical innovator. The Chinese today are probably not radical innovators, but they don't need to be radical innovators. You don't need to be a genius like Steve Jobs in China, because it's the ecosystem that innovates. So if you're Lenovo and somebody comes up with a faster memory or a better piece of software or a bigger screen or a bigger, right? As long as you 10,000 suppliers innovate incrementally, you benefit from their innovation. Everybody benefits from the innovation. This is, in those ecosystems, you share. Not because you want to share, but because if I have a small innovation, you know, I will also benefit from the small innovation of the 10,000 other ones. So the whole ecosystem scales, and the whole ecosystem as such becomes formidable. So when you look at China, and this is very important, right, as we're looking at the Euro-Asian century, or the future of the digital Silk Road, a lot of power and innovation is steaming up from this completely different approach of managing innovation, of managing companies, of getting competitive advantage. And it's not only this company, but it's this company, by the way. Anybody know Frank Wang, DJI? Maybe some of you have great company. Great, right? I mean, amazing drone. This guy, you just heard Max tell you about HKUST. Well, Frank Wang was a student at HKUST, and he came up with an idea to control drones, and he basically, that was part of his thesis. And, you know, he decided to turn the thesis, this intellectual work, into reality. If this guy, Frank Wang, had been studying in Germany or in Russia or at Harvard or MIT, he would have never been able to create DJI, because there's no ecosystems for producing drones. So even if you have a great idea for a drone, you need somebody to build the engine. You need somebody to build the casing, the plastic, the controls, right? It's literally hundreds, if not thousands, of component suppliers. He goes across the border from Hong Kong into Shenzhen, which companies like Huawei or Tencent are in Shenzhen. This is the Silicon Valley of the future, right? Shenzhen. You know, lots of venture capital, lots of opportunity. I mean, you could do it. You come up with any great hardware idea, and you go to Shenzhen. People say that in 2 weeks, you can build a factory, you know, of everything related to electronic, to telecommunications, right? You just go there, and there's suppliers, there's talented workers, there is factory sites, there's everything, right? Everything has a price, extremely efficient, extremely competitive, because there's so much of it. So China is a place for people to realize their dreams, right? And China does not only belong to the Chinese, it belongs to the world, right? It's an opportunity because those are open innovation ecosystems. You will learn more about this when you go to Hong Kong, right? And of course, Shenzhen is next to Hong Kong, right? It's just across the border, so this is obviously a place where we're gonna go to. The next thing I want to tell you about is the nature of the future, right? And the fourth industrial revolution, what's coming onto us. Now, the fourth industrial revolution, you know, there's different stages. You probably have heard of it before. It's different technologies converging, different industries converging. Let me briefly explain you a story. The World Economic Forum, right? Every year they organize the Davos annual event, and its founder, Klaus Schwab, created this narrative, if you will, this concept of the fourth industrial revolution. There is no fourth industrial revolution per se. It's just a framework to understand what's happening in terms of technologies. Because at Davos, what the people at the forum were realizing is that 5 years ago, If you're the president of General Motors, maybe you want, in the evening, you want to sit at the same table of the president of Toyota, or the president of Volkswagen, or somebody in your industry, or to discuss things pertinent to the industry. Today, the president of General Motors doesn't want to sit next to the president of Volkswagen. Who does he want to sit next to? Maybe a Chinese entrepreneur who's building electrical batteries. Maybe next to Travis Kalanick from Uber. Maybe not him anymore, but somebody in the shared economy. Maybe a software company. Maybe an AI company with driverless cars. What the fourth industrial revolution means is that the barriers that separate the different industry segments are converging thanks to the possibilities that technology offers. And this is interesting in many ways, right? I mean, you see the evolution, what's going on, but it also, and it happens everywhere, right? The Internet of Things and biology are related to each other. Artificial intelligence, you see all those different technologies that are growing, that are creating economic opportunity, but at the same time, this needs to be managed in a different way than the economy of the third industrial revolution was managed, right? And this is one of the things we're trying to do, put ourselves into the future and what it means for managers to work within this paradigm. Now, the Internet of Things, just one example. I think most people in manufacturing, as they do digital transformation, they will need to work with big data. They will need to optimize big data. And this means that if you were producing machines in the future, those machines will have to be made intelligent. And they can only be made intelligent if they capture data and they have the right algorithms to make decisions on their own. And this is all about IT. It's all about software, right? It's all about data management. But if you were building machines in the past, you didn't have those capabilities. So you have to acquire those capabilities, and so on and so forth. This happens in every industry. So things are changing. You see here slow risk, and fast risk. Because with fast growth, there's of course a completely different. With fast technological growth, managers need to function in a different way. In the past, the key was processes, for instance. Now it's expertise or the plan. In the past, you move from plan to basically empowerment. Why? Because the CEOs of top companies cannot plan anymore. You cannot plan in a complex, uncertain, fast-moving environment because you don't have the knowledge. You cannot have the knowledge, right? You're the CEO, you're the boss, but there's so much expertise, so much knowledge that is needed for you to make, to move the company forward, that you need to empower people at lower levels of the organization. It's not top-down anymore. It's, organizations are going to be more bottom-up. Organizations are not going to be managed by hierarchies. Organizations are going to be managed by teams. And teamwork and thinking through teamwork is a very different thing than managing hierarchies, right? There's a lot of things, and we'll, obviously this will be discussed in detail. This is, for instance, another interesting things. You in the past, you managed by rules, but today you come up with a rule. Like, for instance, if you don't have a banking license, you should not be a bank. If you have this rule, then you don't have Alibaba becoming a fintech powerhouse, right? So if you follow rules, you become prisoner of the past, whether you're government or you're a company. So too much rules, too much bureaucracy will not allow your organization, your country to capitalize on the possibilities of the fourth industrial revolution. So, but you need principles more than ever. So you need very clear principles. You manage by principles, right? And this is important. What does it exactly mean? I mean, we could just about this thing. We could also be talking for a very long time. But again, the leadership in the fourth industrial revolution is going to be essentially different, right? So leaders are going to be the leaders of a system. They're going to create institutions based on principles. And things are going to be quite transforming. Because of technology, leadership will change, right? And this is maybe the main takeaway, how it will change. This is something we would need to go into more detail. This comes from the World Economic Forum. Again, think systems, not technology. Systems is how things interrelate to each other. Empower, don't determine, right? You need to trust people and you need to build a good team. Things, you design. You never leave things randomly, nothing by default. And values are a feature, not a bug. You will need values because with the absence of rules, right, you need to have some basic principles. And this is going to be given by values. Now, as we close it all up and as we put those different things together, let's see what the role of Russia, the role of China could be in this overall greater Asia period. Will China and Russia, will Russia benefit from the condition of being China's neighbor? You see things from the past, the good relationship between Russia and China. What happened between Russia and China, after this honeymoon, after the Chinese became communists, right, in 1949? How did it all end up? You're probably familiar with history. What started very well ended up in a fight, right? It didn't end. And there's a Chinese saying, "Tong Chuan Yi Meng," which means like same bet, different dreams, right? Which is an, if you will, a metaphor of what can happen when you're in a partnership, but the goals are not the same. The key question that we want to answer now is whether today's China dream is compatible with the dreams of Russia, of Central Asia, of Eastern Europe, of Western Europe, of the Middle East, of India, right? Just like America was creating a world order after World War II, will now China also create its own, cultural, institutional, technological order from which we can all benefit, or not, right? So are the dreams compatible? This picture I took yesterday at the center of Moscow, and you probably can all understand it. This is Tmall.ru, right? When you go to Hangzhou, to the headquarters of Taobao, right, of Alibaba, you're familiar with Alibaba and the 40 Thieves, right? It's a cave where the 40 thieves keep all the treasures, and then Alibaba goes and says, "Open sesame," and then it opens. So today you go to Alibaba, to the headquarters, and you say, "Zhi ma kai men," open sesame, and then of course it's a digital door, right? It opens, and then you go inside, and then you see all sorts. The vision of Alibaba, right? All sorts of displays, everything very super advanced, super cool. And one of the things that that Jack Ma says is, "I'm gonna create 100 million jobs for the world." Now, how do you think Jack Ma is gonna create 100 million jobs for the world? What is his magic formula for that? Putting Tmall in all the countries, right? So building a platform that allows anybody, and there's the example of somebody, shepherd in Kashmir, who produces very nice Kashmir wool, very special, and then sells it to an Italian producer. Right? So this is a platform not for you to sell to China. Yes, of course, you can sell to China, and that's great, but eventually, anybody can sell to anybody else in the world through this. I mean, the perfect example is, I don't know if you're familiar with, after President Trump became president, he had a little bit of a problem with China because he picked up a call that he should not have from the provincial leader of Taiwan, right? He's not supposed to pick up this phone. He did. He had a 2-minute conversation. China was very angry at that, obviously, and sort of the relationships froze. But then something happened. Then a couple of weeks, months later, the first big meeting with a big Chinese leader, non-political, of course, leader that Donald Trump had, was with Jack Ma. And he was very happy after meeting Jack Ma because, you know, Jack Ma promised him not 100 million jobs, but yes, 1 million jobs. And he gave an example of the apple growers in Washington State, right? This farmer who was selling the apples to the Chinese market, and because of that, he was able to double the amount of workers there, right? This platform that the Chinese are building, of course, it will need rules, it will need institutions, but could benefit everybody if it works out well, right? And what does it mean? It means that new institutions will have to be built, new free trade agreements, maybe new bilateral investment treaties. Also, e-commerce, cross-border e-commerce becomes very important, right? And you see from the graphs over here that cross-border e-commerce is increasing. You see as a percentage of total commerce, it's going up everywhere in the world. But this will be opportunity, especially now that there's trade tensions in the world and there is a talk of trade war. What would be nicer if cross-border e-commerce becomes an engine of trade, an engine also of financials, not only trade in goods, but also trade in services, right? Maybe a Russian software developer company through one of those platforms is able to gain projects in other places of the world, maybe in China or maybe elsewhere. But if you look at this map, right, and I'm telling you now a very optimistic vision for the future, but we need to do a reality check. So what we see here, right, in terms of the flows of data and information? Is Eurasia a pipeline in this map for information flows, which would also, of course, include e-commerce and everything related to that, or not? If you look at this map, who is the dominant country with the biggest pipes for data, right? Data pipes or data transmission is probably the key KPI. In the past, you could say, oh, you know, tons of containers or whatever, TEUs, or, you know, you name it, even trading in goods itself. But in the future, the key will be the exchange of information. We all know data is money, is power, etc. And what we see here is that Eurasia, I mean, the center of gravity is the United States. And the United States connects to Europe, connects to Latin America, and connects to China. But if you look at Eurasia itself, there is no big pipeline across Eurasia. This is what we want to achieve. This is what China's Belt and Road Initiative needs to achieve, right? This is what Russian entrepreneurs need to contribute to. This is what European entrepreneurs need to contribute to. Entrepreneurs in Israel, entrepreneurs in India, etc. So this is potential. The fact that it has not been developed yet means that there's things to do for companies. Some of it will have to be supported by institutions, right? And we discussed some of the elements, and we don't need to go into details, although you can see some of the details: improving quarantine, inspection. So all the different rules and regulations that support trade, you know, that support investment, need to be developed across Eurasia. But it's important that the businesses also guide the governments and tell them what they want, because the ultimate vision is, again, a huge pipeline, not only of trade and investment and technology exchange, but also of information across Eurasia. When we mean Eurasia, we mean from all the way from East Asia, you know, through the different routes, going through Russia, going through Central Asia, you know, going through the Arab world, also through India, right? Putting this great, vast continent together through exchanges of information, of data, and so forth. What's really interesting is how Jack Ma articulates the Belt and Road Initiatives, right? He says, The greatest difference between the Belt and Road Initiative, right, and I quote, and general globalization lies in the inclusion of young people, women, smaller enterprises, and developing countries. Belt and Road is not an elite type of initiative. It's very inclusive, right? Both, of course. It aims to reach more people. It aims to reach everybody. So it's both a responsibility and an opportunity. One very important thing, small and medium enterprises. We know that in Russia, small and medium enterprises have it not easy, maybe only 15% of the economy, right? The Belt and Road will definitely help the growth of small and medium enterprises, right? And of course, big enterprises too, entrepreneurial companies too, right? This is the ultimate goal. A final thought before we finish, and then we can have a Q&A session, but it's the difference between Amazon and Alibaba. We have talked about Alibaba, we have talked about the United States, but let's look at those two giants competing with each other. There are some similarities, but there's some big differences. What are the big differences between Alibaba and Amazon in terms of their model? Amazon, we have heard the word platform. Or is Amazon a pipeline? The word platform that we have heard before, we associate it with Alibaba, where everybody goes onto the platform and trades with each other. Amazon is the most optimized, efficient company in the world. What Amazon does is pure magic, right? When they buy, for instance, a company like Whole Foods, right? How much did they pay for Whole Foods? Right? What was it? Yeah, 13 billion, something like that. But many people say, well, actually, they paid zero. Because the value in the stock of Amazon increased more by the huge price tag of Whole Foods. And then the value of other retailers in the US went down. Why is Amazon so valuable? Because it has data. They go, have you heard about Amazon Studios? They're going now into the movie business. They're spending more money on movies than any other company in Hollywood. Maybe Netflix spends more than them, but they spend about $6 billion in movies. Why are they better, theoretically, at producing movies than, for instance, a Hollywood studio is? What is their advantage? They know their customers, right? And you know what? Alexa, if they listen to what you say, they know the mood at your home. Oh, now you're fighting with your wife. Amazon is going to suggest you a comedy, right? So whatever, I'm just giving an example. But some people are saying that Amazon in the future will send you 2 boxes. One box with everything you need for the next 2 weeks, and then an empty box. What do you do with the empty box? You put everything that you don't like in the empty box and ship it back to Amazon. With their big data, within a couple of, maybe 2 or 3 trials, they will get the algorithm for your family right, and they will not make any mistake anymore, because they'll know everything you like, right? Now, Alibaba is different. Alibaba's algorithms are not as smart as Amazon's, but Alibaba allows you to talk to your customers. Amazon doesn't allow you to talk to the customers. They own the data, they own the customers. So you may even deliver the order. You may physically know who you're delivering the order to, but you don't own it, so you cannot market to them. So the orders will come through Amazon. So imagine you're a soft drinks company, right? And your customer, you know that they've run out of soft drinks. So you're Amazon, so you tell to your customer, shall I order a Coke? The Cokes for you for next week. And you say yes, and they deliver Cokes. Maybe next time they order, if Coke doesn't, give the margin that Amazon wants, Amazon could theoretically consolidate all the orders, go to the customer and tell the customer, listen, why don't you get brand B or brand C, or try some apple juice, or try some Amazon Coke? Maybe, well, that sounds not very tasty, but right? Whoever has the data, and they control the data, their pipe, it's their data, they're super optimized, and they share the discounts with the customers. And this is a very interesting model, just like the model of Alibaba is. When you have a customer at Alibaba, do you know their data on the Alibaba platform? Can you chat with the customer directly? Yes, right? You own the data. It's a platform. They enable you. That's what Jack Ma says. I want to create 100 million jobs. I want to help the young. I want to help the small companies. With Amazon, right? It's a different model. So you have two, very distinct approaches. Yes, and they're both good. And we're not taking sides. Yes.
Customers wouldn't go for Alibaba. Let's say some guys sitting somewhere in Houston, in Austin, they would say, why should go for Alibaba? I got Amazon here.
Right. So the question, you saw Tmall. If you're a big soft drinks company, should you go to Tmall?
Would you like to hear me in the microphone?
Well, the question is, why should you go for Alibaba, or if you are in Houston, right? And the interesting thing is that today, the world is being split between the Chinese camp and the American camp. So Amazon is just leaving China, or is irrelevant in China, and Alibaba is not very strong in Europe or in the United States. Russia is mostly now on on the China camp, right? There's some places, like in India, where Amazon and Alibaba are going to fight with each other. Or Singapore. Actually, we're doing research on that. And this is going to be fascinating whenever they compete. But most of the world is divided. Remember the Cold War? Well, now we have something quite similar happening here. And it's going to be interesting which one of the two systems is actually going to prevail. What we want is choice. What we want is the two systems, strong and present in each country. And of course, maybe the Japanese Rakuten, which is yet another system, right? And this is going to provide options and variety. But for now, an American company, Houston, unless they want to sell to China, there would not be advice to use Alibaba.
May I put another angle to that?
Sure.
Very popular word right now, especially in Russia, sanctions.
Okay.
And
let's
let's put a little bit more to it. The slogan of what's his name? Yeah, Donald Trump. America first. Do you think that American business would let any other companies from any other world into their market? Let's say Alibaba into American market. Do you think they're that crazy?
Well,
I think it's present, but I think the major market will be for American companies and not for Chinese companies.
So the big question is, ideally you said America first, the world first, business first, humanity first. At the end of the day, we'll see how things end, right? There's trade conflict, and we'll discuss this, obviously, in this program, because this is very important. We need open borders, we need open trade. We don't like sanctions at all, right? We want everybody to trade with each other. The question is, will that happen or will that not happen? And the question we said earlier is, ideally, we want Alibaba strong in the US and we want Amazon strong in China. So we have the two models, the platform model and the pipe model to choose from, right? And with the different resources and capabilities that those companies bring to it. Eurasia may be a place where both of them will eventually meet and converge, right? So that's why the example of Singapore or India, where they're both competing, is so interesting. I'll finish this shortly, and then we will open it for Q&A, because we only have a couple of slides. Can I team up with Alibaba? Definitely you can. We don't need to go into more details now, but this is something that will be explored. We want to work with both systems. We want to work with the Chinese, we want to work with the Americans, we want to work with everybody and explore the range and expand the range of possibilities. In some cases, it may be more difficult than in others, but this is at least the goal. And this is the last slide as a point of reflection, because we emphasize technology, we emphasize the fourth industrial revolution, but look at what Jack Ma says about Google. Yes, if Google is exploring the border of technology, then what we're doing is employing technology to explore the border of business. In this program, you're going to explore both. The border of technology, what can technology do for you, and how you can extend the range of business models, of business opportunity. So we're going to push you, to make sure that you, as an individual, as an entrepreneur, as an executive, that your organizations, your companies, your governments, right, explore the possibilities of business. Both technology and businesses are extremely important in the context of Eurasia. Now, with this, we're going to go to a Q&A session, and I'm going to ask, how much time do we have, Kirill, for Q&A? 10, 15 minutes? Fantastic. Good. So in case a Russian question comes, I'm all prepared and I can hear it. Now, do we have some questions? Has this stimulated some thoughts? Yes.
It's not a question, it's a more comment. If you may
Yes,
go
please.
back on the previous page.
Previous-
On the map with Alibaba territory and Amazon
Yes.
territory. No, even on the one before. Yeah.
Yes.
So if we will exclude Russia, looks great from territory size, but from population size, it doesn't matter. If you would exclude Russia and then go back to history of Alibaba and compare to countries of Amazon are in the place where the customer protection, original customer protection is very strong from regulation point of view and from culture point of view. If you go back to history of Alibaba, you will see that the reason why they took over China was so-called a digital escrow, when customer is getting paid only when supply is getting paid only when customer is getting the product he wants, which is not case in US. So I would go back from that side, and I will say that really in reality we have here the clash of two titans, which one is coming from regulated and very strong in terms of protection, and another one which is using the pain of customer and vendor. So, and that's why you mentioned Indonesia or Singapore, it's exactly the mix of that two stories. So maybe they will find a conversion of that two stories, and in that case, no one of them will win.
Okay, right. So it will be a very interesting. I mean, you mentioned it, a clash of titans, different models coming from different backgrounds. One with very strong institutions, like in the West. One with more flexible, with more chaos in the market, and yet they're both evolving. Alibaba will come up with unique differentiated models for Western economies. Russia is, for Alibaba, a big experiment, because Russia is Europe after all, and Russia is different than China culturally, institutionally, and so forth. They will go to Eastern Europe, and they will come to Western Europe. Sooner than we think. Western Europeans, by the way, will probably end up welcoming as a balance, right? I mean, you don't want everything to be in the hands of American companies. You probably want a healthy balance. And Alibaba will develop its business models. And the same thing with Amazon. If they want to go to China or if they want to go to India, Amazon will need to change. So you're right, they're coming from different perspectives, but if they move into new territories, they will retain their essence and their business models' salient characteristics, but at the same time, they will adjust and adapt. And that process will happen over the next 5-10 years, and it will be extremely interesting. But yes, thank you very much for your comment, which is an important one, right? Good. What other comments, questions? Yes? Okay.
A matter of fact, is coming back to the same remark earlier about institutions which have to be built. The Chinese market is not open. It's not a plain level playing field over there. Look at the automotive industry, which is still closed. All right. Concerning the interest that you mentioned, it's because they are state banks, and that's why they had to follow the rule by their government. If they were in state banks, it would have been completely different.
Right. So very good point. China is not a liberal market economy like the US or the UK. It's state capitalism. So the state has a very important share and say in the economy. But at the same time, there's also bottom-up dynamism, right? Companies like Huawei, ZTE, Tencent, I mean, all those guys are you know, very much private initiative is very strong within them. So it's a combination of both. Whether China is open or closed, it's also very interesting. I always give the example when we're in Europe with German students, we have a lot of German executives, and we tell them, well, what's the biggest or one of the biggest companies in Germany? Everybody knows Volkswagen. Is Volkswagen making any money in the United States right now? Right after? They did make money, thin margins, tough market, and then they have the diesel gate, which is maybe going to cost them 25 billion or something, I mean, huge amount, right? In Europe, are they making money? They're the largest car company in the world, or, well, top 1, 2. They are also making, actually, and that's very interesting, money in Europe, but it's not nearly anything compared to the money that Volkswagen makes in China. A lot of companies their livelihood depends on how well they're doing in the Chinese market. But they're not only selling in China, they're also getting technologies from China. So in some areas in finance, as you pointed out, China is closed. And there's some big state-owned enterprises that dominate the industry. But even if you look at the big 4 banks in China, right? China Construction Bank, Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, Bank of China, Agricultural Bank of China, those 4 used to have 70% market share in deposit taking. Now they have 30%, right? So things are changing. Let's not estimate the dynamics of China in terms of openness to the world. And especially now, the Chinese are realizing, which what's happening with the President Trump in the United States, that you need to be open, right? So I think in China, what we're seeing is a push for openness. I give you an example. We're based in Switzerland. Switzerland has a free trade agreement with China. Swiss goods are extremely expensive, everything, from pharma to watches, you name it. Switzerland has a trade surplus with China, despite the fact that the goods are so expensive and so high level. So China is in many, not everywhere, and you're right, in many areas it's closed, but in many areas it's still open. China is also quite dynamic and changing. And that's what we want to know. How is China changing, and how are the changes in China going to allow us to capitalize and profit from that? Right? So yeah, also, thanks for this comment. Yes. Yes?
Thomas, what can you tell us about India, taking into the consideration that the population is growing and some producers have already moved from China to India?
Well, India is growing, probably this year again, faster than China. Now the GDP per capita between India and China, I mean, the difference between the two is 3 times. So China is 3 times richer than India. In 1974, they were equal. India and China were equally rich. But for the previous 150 years, India had been richer than China per capita. Right? And historically, they were actually quite similar. Now China is 3 times richer. The normal thing to happen would be that India catches up with China. So India is a great source of opportunity. And because India is, again, 1/3 less GDP per capita wise developed, there is opportunity and there is growth. But the key will be institutions. This is one key. And Indian institutions at this stage are not as good for economic development as Chinese institutions are. And we don't need to go into detail. The second thing is what this gentleman mentioned before. That's the second thing, openness. How open is India for foreign businesses? In some cases, it's taken foreign companies. I mean, there's a recent example of IKEA. I think it was over 10 years, right? To get a license, you come in, you get kicked out. In China, it's full of IKEAs, it's full of McDonald's, it's full of everything. So the Indian market is not nearly as open as the Chinese market to foreign investment and to foreign brands and to foreign companies and to government procurement, etc., etc. So if India will grow and get to the level of China, key is to come up with the right institutions, right? And Narendra Modi, the president, is doing a lot of reforms, and some of them are very enlightened. But next thing, you need to open to the world. Only when you're open to the world, do foreigners profit from your country and your size, and then does your company, your country develop, right? So again, India is going to be part of the discussions of Eurasia, obviously. So I'm glad you brought it up. Yes. Good. Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you for your comments. What can you say about how China achieved its level of high tech, for example, special zones that may be used?
Mm-hmm. Right. It's a very good question, and everybody is trying to figure out how China achieved its success, because it didn't achieve its success following the Washington consensus. And there is something called the China consensus. Oh, sorry, the Beijing consensus, not the China consensus, the Beijing consensus. And it's something that's very interesting for other countries in the world. And there's many theories, many books written on that. I will try to simplify it and tell you. It's a combination of top-down state planning, right? So there's still Piatiletka, right, in China, 5-year plans. And at the same time, you also have bottom-up entrepreneurship as evidence in places like Shenzhen. So in some areas, Chinese in some industries are extremely competitive. It's a very free market where everybody competes with each other, like the smartphones. If your smartphone for 1 or 2 years doesn't innovate, you're out of the market. I mean, really, companies that were leading in smartphones in China completely disappeared because they were not able to keep up. The government is not involved in that. They're not going to be helped. Right? So extremely competitive dynamics, bottom-up, entrepreneurial, and at the same time, you have a state that invests in education, that invests in infrastructure, that has certain policies to encourage innovation. The combination of both has resulted in this greatest of all economic miracles. Nobody predicted it. 20, 30 years ago, everybody said, well, there is no way China will continue to grow, and it's growing, and it will not grow forever, but so far, so good. So far, so very good, right, in the case of China. Good? Good? I think this was, I'm seeing the sign from Kirill. I think we have arrived to the end of this session. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll be looking forward to talking to some of you later on. Thank you.